The Jets get a win they desperately needed. We'll discuss today on Lockon Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, October 9th, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out and help other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Well, the Jets won in Denver in Week 5. They come out of a game against the Broncos victorious. The final score 31-21 yesterday in Denver, and we're going to recap the game today. It was not the prettiest exhibition of football you will ever see. In fact, I think one of the biggest takeaways I had was it really did look like a game between a pair of 1 and 3 teams. A lot of sloppy play, a lot of unforced errors, a lot of very suspect decisions in this game. But you know what? The NFL is a business where you are judged by wins and losses. And the New York Jets came away with a win, and it was a win they absolutely needed to get. This team could not afford to fall to 1 and 4 for a couple reasons. First of all, the odds against you making the playoffs when you fall to 1 and 4 are pretty astronomical. But beyond that, I think there'd be a sense of the season's falling apart if the Jets lost this game. We saw it a couple weeks ago in New England where there was a lot of frustration. You started to see things boil over on the sidelines. Now they got a little bit of a reprieve last week against Kansas City where they've played pretty well even in a loss. But you knew that you were one loss away, and this would have been a really ugly loss because the Broncos are a very bad football team. The Broncos are a team that right now figure to be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. You know, they're contenders for the number 1 overall pick. So I think if you lose that game, that's the type of thing where you could see the locker room maybe starting to turn a little bit. And I think also in a practical sense, you'd say if we can't beat Denver, who are we beating on this schedule? Now, of course, the NFL has a lot of twists and turns and there are surprises along the way, but this would have been a really bad loss. And beyond that, you just would have had this feeling that the season is in free fall because it would have been a 4th straight loss with the Philadelphia Eagles on the horizon, a likely 5th straight loss next week. And at 1 and 5, I mean, you can pretty much start focusing on draft prospects. So Jets got the win that they needed. It was not the cleanest effort. It was not the best game. In some ways, I feel like the coaching staff's going to love this game because I think coaches love wins where the team doesn't necessarily play that great. You get the victory, so you get all the spoils that come with the win, but nobody's going to be overconfident. You have plenty of things you can work on. You're still going to have the team's attention during the week. You're going to have things you can focus on fixing. So, you know what? The Jets got to win. That's what really matters in this game. They did enough. The first half, they did not play that well. In fact, I think in the first half, in many ways, they were fortunate to still be in the game going into the locker room because the offense was not doing a whole lot. Zach Wilson really had a bad first half. The defense did not have a good first half. They allowed 13 points. In fact, I mean, outside of the sack Al Woods had that turned into a safety, defense did not get to stop the entire first half. They allowed the Broncos to score on 3 possessions. Second half, they came out and things were better. The defense once again kicks it into gear in the second half. It's been maybe the best second half defense in the NFL. You know, the Jets, DJ Reed in particular, who unfortunately missed the game yesterday, talked about how the goal was to be like the 85 Bears in the preseason. Well, in the second half, they've been dominant. The first half, they've had issues, but in the second half, the Jets really heated up defensively. The Broncos only got 1 touchdown at a point where maybe the Jets' defensive intensity faded a little bit in the fourth quarter because they were holding a 2-score lead. So maybe you don't approach that with the same vigor that you approached the earlier parts. And then when the Jets needed to get a stop, with the game on the line in the fourth quarter after, an unfortunate interception by Zach Wilson, the defense delivered again with Quincy Williams really stepping up. And how good is Quincy Williams this year? This was a guy who the Jets kept talking up the last 2 seasons. And, there were some excellent games in there. You saw the flashes of potential, but you never saw him do it consistently. I think 5 games into the season, we could say Quincy Williams he's a star. I mean, he looks great. He looks like one of the 5 best linebackers in the NFL right now. I've been calling him a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker based on his play this year. I might even take that a notch higher. He's borderline all pro right now, the way he's playing. He had a pair of sacks on that last drive, including the strip sack that ended the game. Jets defensive line really turned it up in the second half, though. A sack by Bryce Huff. Jermaine Johnson had kind of a hustle sack there, and then the 2 by Quincy Williams. So the Jets had 0 sacks in the first half, 4 in the second half, including 2 that helped close. Well, I guess one of them, the Jets got a sack on the last drive, and then Russell Wilson hit a big pass to move the chain. So one of them helped close the game out, but 2 sacks on the last drive. And on the offensive side of the ball, the star is Breece Hall. And you knew this was kind of the formula the Jets were looking for. Lean on the defense, lean on Breece Hall. This was the first game he was off a pitch count. My goodness, what a phenomenal game. And a game that I'm sure was circled on Breece's calendar because of what happened a year ago in Denver when he suffered that torn ACL. The Jets lost him for the rest of the season. It was a point where the Jets never really were the same team. After Breece Hall left the lineup, the offense was never as good because they lost their go-to guy. And it's kind of interesting because even though Breece has been back early this year, he's been on a pitch count. It really has not been a Breece Hall-based offense. Last year was the point where Breece Hall stopped being the go-to guy on offense because of the injury. This may have been the game where Breece Hall reclaimed the mantle of go-to guy for the Jets on offense because he ran 22 times for 177 carries, had a 72-yard touchdown run, and he was every bit as good as those stats. I mean, he was keeping the Jets ahead of schedule on early downs. He was breaking big runs left and right. It was a phenomenal performance by Breece Hall to the point where the Jets maybe to their own detriment, maybe leaned on the run game a little bit too much. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But, you know, the whole point of the way this team's constructed, they want to lean on the run game. They want to lean on the defense. They want to make things as easy as possible for Zach Wilson. And Zach Wilson, again, had a bad first half. I thought he bounced back well in the second half. And I feel like that's part of the reason Breece is here is when things aren't going well for Zach, it gives the Jets a chance to maybe give him a little bit of breather and keep the offense on schedule. And then Zach, I think, kind of caught his breath after that big Breece Hall run and hit some key passes, including one to Tyler Conklin in the fourth quarter that, you know, the drive ended in an interception. So the Jets did not get the points they were looking for to ice the game. But still, it was a big drive from the standpoint that the Jets were able to run time because they extended it with the huge completion to Conklin. And also, when the Jets turned the ball over, it was further down the field because they had extended the drive. It was an up and down game for Zach Wilson. I don't think he was anywhere near as good as he was against Kansas City. In fact, you know something? After the Dallas game week 2, Zach Wilson had a horrible stat line, and I told you that I felt like his level of play was better than the statistics would indicate. I feel like this game's kind of the opposite. I don't think it was a terrible game. I think it was much better than the game he played last year in Denver that the Jets won, where I think last year in Denver, Zach was just bad. Zach was up and down in this game. The stats look really good. I don't think he was quite as good as the stats. In fact, I don't think he was anywhere near as good as the stats would indicate, but he did hit some key passes. He made the plays the Jets needed. The Jets absolutely needed when they called upon him. And the Jets were able to come out of Denver with a big victory. And again, and Greg Zuerlein also a star because the Jets, and this was one of the banes of my existence in this game, the Jets settled for a lot of field goals. And Zuerlein was perfect, 5 for 5. He made a 49-yarder, a clutch 49-yarder in the second half. Greg Zuerlein, you know, for years, for whatever reason, the first 3 years Joe Douglas was here, he couldn't figure out the kicker spot. And then thankfully last year, he went to Greg Zuerlein, and Zuerlein has just delivered for the Jets. So Jets get enough done. You know, they do enough. It wasn't a clean game, lots of mistakes, but again, it's a win business. It's a win and loss business in the NFL. And the New York Jets got a win they absolutely had to have in Denver. But I'm still going to be critical of some people in this game. And I hate to do it, but I really have to be critical of the coaching staff. In my view, they were almost the 12th man for Denver in this game. Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett in particular, I think deserve a lot of criticism. I think what they did this week is not going to work most weeks, and we'll discuss that continuing this Monday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. When you place a $5 bet, that's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. Jets are playing the Philadelphia Eagles, the defending NFC champions, this coming weekend. Right now, the Jets are 6.5-point underdogs at home. So if you believe in the Jets, you can lay some money down at FanDuel. not only enjoy a Jets win, but make some money. And the app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props. So if you think Breece Hall is going to have another big game, that could be some easy money for you. Also over-unders and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes Monday through Friday, and then bonus episodes in the evening as big news breaks. Sometimes we have weekend episodes after games. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching on YouTube. We're recapping the Jets' victory 31-21 over Denver yesterday at the Mile High City. Jets get a win they needed. They go to 2-3. So how can you say anything negative? Well, look, I got to call the coaching staff out. I thought this was a terribly coached game. I thought the Jets should have run away with this game in the second half. I think Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett did not coach a winning game in this one. And I know like the storyline is going to be Nathaniel Hackett gets his revenge on Denver. He gets his revenge on Sean Payton. I don't think he did a very good job. But I'm going to start with Robert Saleh. And look, I don't have anything specific to this, but the Jets keep having these awful starts to these games. And in some weeks, it's really cost them. Every week in the first half, the Jets have played badly. And that's got to stop. And at some point, like, I don't know whether it's schematic. I don't know whether it's something Saleh's not preparing the team in the locker room. I don't know whether it's something as simple as like the pregame warmups aren't going well. I have no idea. But what I do know is that when a team keeps sleepwalking through the first quarter of games, and in this case, the second quarter of games, that's on the head coach. I mean, at some point, you got to say that's on the head coach. I thought Saleh, and I think like Saleh just like sets this conservative mindset for this team. And I understand, look, with Zach Wilson, a quarterback, you're still trying to kind of work through things. Zach has clearly improved over the quarterback he was last year, but he's still not really a quarterback you can count on to carry the load. I understand that. But it just feels like the Jets are going out there and just hoping that Zach Wilson doesn't implode. And they're just trying to do everything possible to avoid asking Zach Wilson to make any sort of plays. And to me, that's a mistake. To me, that's the type of thing I just have a tough time with, because I don't think that's a formula for success in the NFL. Yes, Jets need to lean into the run game more than most teams, but you still got to be willing to try and put points on the board. It's almost like Saleh is not trying to like maximize the number of points his team has. They're just trying to like scrape at just enough points so that the defense could go out there and win the game. And I don't know that that's a great formula in the NFL. I mean, another thing that was conservative in the fourth quarter, the Jets have a 4th and 1 on the Denver 31. I understand they're up 21-13, so a field goal puts you up 2 scores, but you're settling for a 49-yard field goal. You've been running the ball effectively all game. Denver has a bad run defense. If you go for it there and you pick up a first down, it allows you to run the clock down even more. And if they had done that, Denver may not have had time for that last possession. And this goes back to what I'm saying is that this game should have been over by halfway through the fourth quarter. And the Jets coaching staff, I think, kept Denver in this game. And that goes to Nathaniel Hackett's play calling in this game. And yes, I understand the Jets had about 400 yards of offense. They did not have 400 yards of offense because Nathaniel Hackett called an effective game. And yes, the storyline is going to be Hackett gets his revenge on Payton in Denver. The Jets had 400 yards of offense because Breece Hall is an amazing back. Because Breece Hall might be one of the top 3 backs in the NFL. Hackett was way too conservative in the second half of this game. And understanding that Denver has a bad run defense. And understanding, again, you're going to lean into the run game more than your typical team. That doesn't mean you have to be predictable. That doesn't mean you have to eschew any chance of taking a shot. Breece Hall is an amazing back, but he's not going to break more than one 70-yard run in a game. I mean, that's just not going to happen. He may have like one huge run in a game because he's that good, but he's not going to have more than that. And the Jets just kept running first and second down, and it put them in these third down situations. And the problem with this is that essentially the Jets play calling, and see, this is where there's a difference between an individual play working and the collective play calls together making sense, because the individual play calls were working pretty well. Breece Hall was breaking, 5-6 yards consistently on first down. So you can say, oh, the plays worked, but there's not a lot of coherence to the play calling, because when you're just constantly running the ball on both first and second down, you're essentially taking the threat of a big play off the table. And NFL offenses need big plays to produce points, to produce a lot of points at least. The Jets essentially just said, we don't need big plays. We're just going to keep running the ball and then hope Zach Wilson hits a pass on third down. Or sometimes you get close enough and you can keep running it. The problem with that approach is that you need to execute at a high level 12 straight times, which just is not realistic. And that's the reason the Jets kept settling for field goals. They weren't even trying to make big plays. you have to build in shot plays. You have to build in, especially when you're running the ball so effectively, you have to build in play action where you throw the ball down the field. The one time the Jets did that in the second half, it worked. Zach Wilson hit a big pass to Garrett Wilson, but they didn't do it enough. I understand you. Again, you can run the ball a lot and still be unpredictable on offense and still give yourself the potential to maximize your big plays because you need a 30-yard gain. Otherwise, you're just going to settle for a bunch of field goals. And the Jets settling for field goals in this game kept Denver in it. This may work against Denver. It's not going to work against most teams that they play. And it would be one thing if you said, okay, well, Denver's a bad defense. You wanted to really just focus on the run. But this is what we saw week 1. It's what we saw week 2. It's what we saw week 3. Week 4, we saw a much better game plan, and I praised him for it. I praised Nathaniel Hackett for that. We did not see that in this game. We went back to the stagnant offense week 1, week 2, week 3, and it's just not going to work against most teams. In fact, the Jets were put in a position where they could conceivably lose the game by this conservative coaching. It's not good enough. The coaches need to get better. I left this game feeling like really good about a lot of Jets players. I left this game feeling really bad about Jets coaches. Hackett's offense is unimaginative. There's not a lot there. There's not a lot of, I understand you have issues with Zach Wilson that maybe they don't entirely believe in him at this point, even though he's improved. But this sort of approach on offense is simply not going to work for this team over the long haul. Breece Hall is going to get his. Breece Hall is going to produce some big plays. Breece Hall is going to produce big yardage. But if you keep running him into the line, well, teams are going to sell out against the run, and they're not going to break as many big runs. Breece Hall's so good that he may get 4 or 5, 6 yards, but an offense cannot be built entirely on 4 or 5, 6 yard gains. There have to be big plays, and they have to come through the passing game. If you look at the game against Kansas City, the Jets were aggressive, and that's why they moved the ball so effectively against Kansas City. And there are going to be a lot more defenses like Kansas City than there are Denver. And I'd have a different approach to this if I felt like this was just a Denver-specific approach, but I've seen Hackett enough to know that it's not. I worry about this team's coaching going forward. And I'll be honest with you, there are good things about this coaching staff. I think Saleh has kept the team afloat through adversity. I think, losing Aaron Rodgers was devastating. I give him credit for that. Hackett's obviously done a better job at relating with his players than Mike LaFleur did. Guys have really bought in. You don't have as many guys complaining as you did a year ago. So these are positives. I mean, coaches have good traits and bad traits, but the overall conservative demeanor of this team, the conservative tenor of the coaching decisions, I don't like that. And I think that this almost caused the Jets to lose a game that by all accounts they should have won handily. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast. We'll look forward to next week. The Jets are playing the Philadelphia Eagles. How did the Jets need to play that game? We'll discuss continuing this Monday game recap edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs, then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidate with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. I don't think the Jets really need LinkedIn Jobs. They have a scouting department that find great players like Breece Hall. But if you want to find the Breece Hall in your industry, you got to try LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. And LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. We're recapping a New York Jets victory 31-21 over the Denver Broncos. Not the cleanest game you'll ever see played on both sides. A lot of unforced errors by both the Jets and the Broncos, but Jets come out on top. Jets win the game. The Jets, for all intents and purposes, kept their season alive. And now they have a game against the Philadelphia Eagles coming up where I don't think anybody's expecting them to win. As we talked about on FanDuel, the Jets are pretty big underdogs, about a touchdown at this point. Can the Jets pull the upset? Well, of course, any given Sunday, any team can beat another team. It feels like the kind of game the Jets overachieve. If you look at the early results of this season, they're at home. They're playing a team that's supposed to be elite. I mean, the 2 times that's happened so far this year, Jets have come out and played a really good game. They did it week 1 against Buffalo, who's supposed to be a Super Bowl contender, even though they lost yesterday. Even in a loss to Kansas City last week, again, they fought really hard. They played really well. So there's a chance for the Jets to win this game. There's talent on this Jets team. I think we're seeing that, from the defensive line, which is finally starting to show up, and they're also finally starting to give Breece Hall some more reps. Quincy Williams looking like a star. The cornerbacks, a unit that was really banged up, held up pretty well in that game. Breece Hall steps into the lineup, and after a year and a half where Breece Hall's looked awful, he kind of reverted to his solid form of 2021. Then on the offensive side of the ball, Breece Hall just completely taking over, and Zach Wilson hitting throws as needed. Jets need to do better. I don't think the performance the Jets gave yesterday will give them a chance to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Number one, they have to start faster. There's no question about that, and I don't know what the coaching staff needs to do. They can't come out and sleepwalk through another first quarter. It's a recipe for disaster. So that's number one. They have to start faster. Number two, again, they have to be more aggressive on offense. You're not going to beat the Philadelphia Eagles kicking field goals. You got to score touchdowns against this team. As good as the Jets defense is, Philly's going to score points. Jalen Hurts is a star quarterback, and that leads me to my next point. Jets have to figure out this quarterback scrambling thing. I mean, really, in the first half when the Jets were struggling on defense, the two things that were destroying them were Russell Wilson scrambles and screens. And the Eagles will do a lot of both of those. The Jalen Hurts is as good of a quarterback with his legs as exists in the NFL. Eagles will drop a lot of screens to make things simple. They have playmakers up and down their lineup. And it's kind of frustrating because in theory, the Jets defense is designed to be able to deal with both, because Jets play a lot of zone, especially on early downs. And the third down scrambles hurt them a lot of times when they played man-to-man. But there was even one yesterday where Russell Wilson's picked up a first down on the ground where the Jets were in zone. And the reason zone is tends to be better against screens, and it tends to be better against scrambles is you have guys kind of more evenly allocated across the field. In man-to-man coverage, you just send your receivers down the field and you run off all the cover guys, and then the cover guys aren't in the area to defend a screen or a scramble. Against zone, it's tougher. It should be tougher to scramble, and it should be tougher to execute screens because players are always there are players across the field. There are players at pretty much any spot. So the spot where you're running the screen, you're not running the defender off because he's playing man-to-man. There's somebody who's assigned each area of the field. So in theory, it should be easier to deal with these things. The Jets need to work on this. And I don't know that there's necessarily a schematic fix. I think the Jets just need to play better. Sometimes we talk about adjustments that need to be made. Sometimes we talk about what the coaches need to fix. Maybe it's just having the team better prepared, because I don't know that there's necessarily some X's and O's thing. And that when you watch I think that also goes with the starts of these games. I don't know that the Jets are necessarily coming out schematically bad. I think they're just coming out flat. And whatever needs to change there. And it's really difficult to analyze something like that because there's nothing obvious on film. There's no statistic that tells you exactly what the issue is. Jets just need to come out and play better football, because the effort that they gave against Denver, that's good enough to beat Denver. I don't know I don't know whether it's good enough to beat other teams. There aren't many teams that the Jets can beat playing that way. And I'm not saying this to say you take away the win, because Denver happened to be the opponent yesterday. So you got the win. You scored more points than them. That's all that matters. But going forward, that effort's not going to be good enough to beat a lot of teams. So you're going to need to see a lot of improvement from the Jets, especially in the areas I mentioned. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the show. So is giving this episode a big thumbs up on YouTube. Hope you have a great Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.